Thanksgiving is just around the corner, and one of the biggest tropes pertaining to Thanksgiving is that you're going to be sitting with a bunch of family members who believe stupid things. Someone might be sitting with their libtard aunt, or their conservative bro, far-right redneck uncle, whatever. People have insults to sling around, and everybody gets into fights, but guess what? That's your family. Bill Maher made a really remarkable point on his show the other day, but the most alarming thing is that he fears a new civil war. At least that's how Newsweek frames it. Newsweek's far from a right-wing publication, saying Bill Maher is toning down anti-Trump routine for the sake of peace. Fears new civil war. The reason I bring up Thanksgiving, I think one of the reasons that Bill Maher did this segment is because Thanksgiving is coming, and we often talk about arguing with our family and friends. He made a very remarkable point. Think about the political differences you have with your own family, your own blood, and then think about the rest of the country. And he said something really, really great. He says, the one thing you learn to say at these family gatherings, let it go. Now, I do think that in this segment, when he talks about, needing to tone things down because the left insults the right insults the left, everybody's trying to own each other, I think he does still have a very liberal bias. But I will say, bless this man's heart for trying. He's saying he's going to tone things down. He's not going to be, he says he's played into the insulting of the right, and he's realized that it's getting too dangerous, and that if we don't tone things down, there will be a second civil war. And what's really crazy to me, it sounded like I was listening to myself. I record videos all the time for the past 2 years saying basically what he's saying. There's a reason why I don't insult and rag on, Trump supporters and Republicans, and I try to hear them out and try to understand them to the best of my ability. Because I know, like Bill Maher said, if there's one thing that's true, having a country with democratic institutions means you're going to be living and working with people who you can't stand. Let's take a look at this story and see exactly what Bill Maher is on about. Newsweek says Bill Maher is toning things down and fears civil war. Bill Maher is changing his tune on HBO's Real Time, telling viewers Friday night that he plans to tone down his comedic routine mocking Donald Trump and his supporters over fears that the political division in the U.S. could lead to a second civil war. Now, at the end of the segment, he says he never feared that George W. Bush would lock up journalists, their opponents, or him. I gotta say, that's a bit crazy, because I still don't think that's the case. We were told all of these things about 2016, like Trump wouldn't accept the results and all that, but that's not what's happening. It's the other side. So while I disagree with his perspective, he makes a really great point. The segment was fantastic, by the way, talking about how they will never, he said, you will never understand why they vote for Trump, and they will never understand your obsession with gluten. And it's funny, it's a joke, but he's right. There are people in different parts of the country who just grew up in a very different place. They have different responsibilities, they have different beliefs, and we have to work together, otherwise it falls apart. Quote, I've been guilty of saying things like that, Maher said, referring to name-calling of the right. I'm going to try to stop. I've learned that the anti-intellectualism of the right doesn't come primarily from stupidity, it comes from hate. Telling people they're irredeemable is what makes them say, you know what, I'd rather side with Russia than you. This was a remarkable segment where he did have a lot of criticism for Trump supporters and the right, but it was framed in the sense that they were making these problems. That when Bill Maher or Hillary Clinton calls people baskets of deplorables, don't be surprised when they say, fine. Let me tell you something. The other day, there was a journalist from the Washington Post during the hearing and was mocking the GOP, saying they talk about Alexandra Chalupa all the time. Why don't they have her testify? Chalupa is the woman who was a DNC consultant who got dirt from Ukraine. And then, it's a complicated story, but she was involved in that Ukrainian meddling. He then fact-checked himself, realizing he was wrong. He was a fact-checker himself and said, I got this one wrong. I'm deleting it. The GOP did call Alexandra Chalupa, but Schiff blocked it. All of a sudden, I see a bunch of people on the right mocking him. And it's the same thing, okay? You can't do this. Like, I have made this point so many times. I said, listen, this is a journalist who did some dumb hot take, realized they were wrong. They actually checked their work, surprisingly, journalists doing it, deleted the tweet, published a screenshot, said they were wrong, retracted, corrected, apologized, and even criticized themselves as having 4 Pinocchios for screwing that up. And I said, much, much respect. Absolutely, class act, the right thing to do. If you only ever insult and be right, what's the point of coming clean? This journalist could have said, what's the point? Even if I come out and correct, no one on the left is going to say anything, and the right is going to insult you anyway, so why bother? And that's why I think everybody needs to hear this message and pay attention to this. Let's read more about Bill Maher, and we'll circle back to this. He says, lately we've been hearing more and more about a second civil war, which sounds impossible in this modern affluent country. It is not. We talk about Trump as an existential threat, but his side sees Democratic control of government the exact same way. When both sides believe the other guy taking over means the end of the world, yes, you can have a civil war. Spot on. I try explaining this to people, and I'll tell you what, I don't have the biggest channels on YouTube. Steven Crowder's got 10 times or 5 times if you combine the subscriber count on both my channels, but he's got 5-6 million subs. And these are people who are more in tune with hearing just the right-wing perspective. Granted, I understand I am not your progressive perspective individual, and I probably agree with Steven Crowder on facts of reality more than most people, but politically we have our disagreements. But the point is, I feel like most people who can stand watching me are those who aren't entrenched in confirmation bias. There are many people on the right, and there are many more people on the left who refuse to listen. And I'm sorry, this is a fact. Jonathan Haidt's research shows this. The left can't predict moderate or conservative behavior, but moderates and conservatives can predict the left. The problem with the left is that they don't quite understand. I'll give you a really good example, actually. Dave Rubin got an email from Ocasio-Cortez, and he tweeted, "Why am I getting this email from you? Who has my email address?" Her response was, "I'm sorry, someone must have mistaken you for a journalist." And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of lefties and woke journalists started going oh, sick burn. And there are even people who are libertarians calling it a sick burn. And I'm like, well, hold on, man. You don't know anything about Dave Rubin, okay? This is what was really strange to me. Because I was on his show and I said, what you are doing is journalism. And Dave said, no, it's not. I reject it. And that was a couple of years ago. He rejected it outright. No. He has a political position. He espouses his positions, and he talks with people, and he does not consider it journalism. But all of these lefties think AOC burned him by saying someone thought you were a journalist. From the perspective of understanding who Dave is, actually having the facts on your side, the reality was, if someone thought Dave was a journalist, that was a compliment to his work, like when I said it, not a burn. The reason I bring this up is that the echo chamber became palatable. You could see all of these woke lefties going whoa, oh man, you burned him. It's like, dude, what if I called Dave a chef? He posted a picture of a steak, right? And I said, someone must have mistaken you for a chef. Dave would be like, I'm not a chef. What are you talking about? I don't do anything like that. So to me, this is an example of how you have people on the left, they can't understand the right at all. But anyway, let me circle back, because I'm going off on a tangent. The point is, when I talk to, say, Joey Salads, I realized at first I was hostile, and that was a mistake. Because if you tell someone there's no redeeming them, then yeah, they'll just double down and say, I would rather, when he says this about they would rather side with Russia than you, it shows people, or what does he say? When both sides believe they're, oh yeah, you know what, I'd rather side with Russia than you. And it showed people wearing shirts that said they would rather side with Russia than a Democrat. Yeah, we can't have that. But I'll tell you what, it is a lot easier for me to talk to a Trump supporter than it is for me to talk to a Democrat or a liberal. I kid you not. I can have a conversation with a Trump supporter and say, here's what I think. And they'll say, I see what you're saying, but I think you're wrong for these reasons. I have a conversation with someone on the left and they devolve into ad hominems and accuse me of being a grifter and all this other nonsense. It's like I avoid those things on purpose. Let's read a little bit more. Otherwise, I'm going to spiral out. And Maher responded with viewers. Maher reasoned with viewers to show tolerance and coexist peacefully with people who do not share their political viewpoint. We are going to have to learn to live with each other, or there will be blood. So don't freak out if Ellen sits next to George Bush at a football game, Maher added, referring to the criticism Ellen DeGeneres received in October for hanging out with Bush. Bush was not my idea of a good president, but I never worried he was going to lock up his political opponents or reporters or me. You see, here's the thing. I can respect Maher for pointing this out, but let's be real. Trump's not going to lock these people up, okay? Trump's not going to arrest journalists. You live in a paranoid, delusional state. And I'm not saying that to be disrespectful. I'm saying that as a matter of fact, and that I'm appreciative of you realizing that you are feeding into this machine. I have said it over and over again, that I have been mean before. I try not to do that. I try to be very respectful, you know, even to people I disagree with a whole lot, and I actively try to promote those I disagree with. One of the people in particular I usually promote David Pakman. I disagree with him. I think he said some disparaging things about me several times, but you know what? That's fine. Because people say the same thing about me and people say the same thing about him. And so the best thing we can do is try and hear each other out, even if it's mind numbing. Like, it's really annoying. I'll tell you what, man, you got to understand, when I'm reading all the news, like, I'm looking at Brian Stelter's Twitter feed, I'm just like, this is nuts. Like, what reality does this guy live in? And they do these things that are really annoying that I try to avoid, calling all news fake news. Like, I'm using Newsweek here for a reason. I'm using Newsweek because it is aligned more with the left by most standards, by most, objective analysis. Newsweek is left wing, and they're associated with the Daily Beast. And so I try using left wing perspectives on purpose to show, like, I'm trying. I use the Daily Wire, I use Daily Caller, I use BuzzFeed, I use Vox. Brian Stelter tells you not to listen to the other side. These are things we need to avoid. And so when I'm reading his Twitter feed and seeing these like misleading phrases and these tricks, it gets frustrating, it gets annoying. But you know what? You know what I've said in the video I did about Brian? I said I respect him for engaging. I think he's not the worst person in the world. A lot of people want to rag and insult him all day and night. And I think and I've called out Tucker Carlson for insulting him and Zucker, people I'm not a big fan of. Like, I think I'm glad Bill Maher is saying this. But let's bring up another point. Him talking about a second civil war. A lot of people get mad when I talk about what a civil war really means. And I've been saying it for a long time. Surprise, surprise, I was just ahead of the market. Okay, I can see these things unfolding before us. And I make predictions based off of the probability of which variable will result. Like, okay, let me try and rephrase this. We have multiple pathways in front of us. I'm looking at them and trying to figure out which one is more likely and for what reason. From that, I make predictions. Sometimes I'm wrong. In fact, I'm often wrong. I thought the Republicans were going to dominate the midterms. They didn't. There's a lot of things I didn't understand. And that's why it's important to listen to the other side. But Bill Maher is now saying the same thing on a primetime HBO show to the masses. Civil war is possible. So let me tell you, it is not a game. This is real. You've got to make sure that when you're talking to people, what really bothers me on Twitter is like the constant attacks on everybody, no matter what they do. Like I mentioned, that journalist, I'm like, why you got to be mean? The dude admitted he made a mistake. Like, give him a high five. How much better would the world be if every time someone made a mistake, they when they realized it, they acknowledged the mistake. BuzzFeed did a story accusing actual Trump supporters of being bots. Twitter started suspending people. I'm not going to say they were responsible because who knows why these people were suspended. But they started claiming these tweets in support of Trump were robotic or automated without evidence, without proof. Instead of admitting, this journalist, he was wrong, because it later turned out Jack Posobiec put out this tweet. Everyone started tweeting too, and he's got half a million followers. Then yeah, you're going to see 7,000 people tweet right away. He said they were bots. He could have just said, I overlooked the fact that Posobiec tweeted this out, and I think that's probably where it came from. Instead, what did he say? Nope. No, I'm talking to Twitter. Twitter says it might be real. Nope, they're bots. Nope, it's automated. And then he started trying to list all of these reasons why there was more likely to be bots doing it, implicating his own co-author on the story who was doing the same thing. He was claiming, like, if you tweet more than 50 times a day, it's suspicious. It's like your own writer, journalist at BuzzFeed was doing the same thing. Imagine a world where people said, I think I'm wrong about this. And I'll give a shout out to Jordan Peterson when he did that interview on, it was Jim Jeffries, I think. And I know it's all spliced up, but he was asked about, being compelled to speak or being compelled to serve somebody. And he said it was wrong. And then he was asked about the civil rights movement. And then Jordan just went, maybe I was wrong about that. Just like right away, he had the frame of mind and he had the discipline to say, yeah, I could be wrong. Think about it. How many people just want to own the other side? That's what Bill Maher talks about. If that's the mentality we have, then we really are headed for a second civil war. But I want to end with one important point, okay, about what a civil war would be or what it would look like. In the past, I've talked about insurgency, street skirmishes. Those are happening, okay? And they may be happening a bit less than they were a couple of years ago. We'll see what happens after the election, 2020, or if Trump is impeached and removed, which I really doubt. But let's say Trump isn't elected again. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of angry people. Let's say he does win re-election. It'll be a lot worse. But more importantly, what we have going on right now, a lot of people are saying in the impeachment inquiry These people don't have firsthand knowledge. Fact. Many of them do not. I don't even know what Yovanovitch's testimony was supposed to be about. They're trying to frame it like a criminal conspiracy, that Trump fired her to get her out of the way. Oh, please, come on, dude. You need so much more evidence to go there. But that's what they're doing. So what ends up happening is they say the only reason these witnesses don't have firsthand knowledge is because Trump is blocking. That's right. Donald Trump blocked people from testifying, saying, do not testify. Do not answer those subpoenas. Oh, heavens. Oh no. Why would Trump do such a one-sided... Oh, I'm sorry. Adam Schiff blocked Republicans' call for witnesses as well. If Adam Schiff is going to say, these people will not testify, I will not allow it. And Donald Trump says, these people will not testify, I will not allow it. We don't have one side or the other being corrupt. We have two factions of government refusing to acknowledge the system. Okay? Whether the system is right or wrong. I'm not saying Adam Schiff is right to call them or they're right to stop. I'm just saying all that matters is Adam Schiff in Congress is saying no to these witnesses. They will not testify. Trump is saying the same thing. They are two equal branches of government saying no to witnesses. Enough. These people seem to think it's always going to be the other. I don't care who thinks they're right or wrong. I'm telling you, this is a possibility. And even Bill Maher is recognizing it now. So I will tell you, read what Matt Taibbi wrote about this. Listen to what Bill Maher says about this. And you need to get past one of the biggest mistakes people make. They assume that this will always just be two factions marching down the street. Someone messaged me saying, what you need to understand about the deep state, because I have people who support me who work for the federal government and things like that, and they said, somebody sent me the story about how they work in a federal branch of government, and they see it. There is the culture war within their own ranks, that some people are diehard anti-Trump and some aren't. Some like the president, and many are just the average person. They don't care. They're like, man, calm down. But these factions exist. So I'll tell you what happens. Trump, they may vote to impeach Trump. Senate probably wouldn't remove him, and I think we'll get past this. But let's say something happens where some Democrats pull something, witnesses are barred from the Senate, even though the Senate has a majority, and there's some obstruction, and it results in a removal. Then you have two factions of government fighting over what comes next. Then they start counting heads. There are certain military branches who are probably thinking the president must not be subverted by this meddling. They refuse to accept the results of the 2016 election. They're subverting the Constitution. The left faction then says Trump was duly removed. He's corrupt. He must be stopped. He's rejecting the rule of law. They both see the same thing. All of a sudden, you have different heads of different departments counting heads. Who's on my side? And as Matt Taibbi wrote, they jump in their cars and they speed as fast as possible down the street to get to the marshal's office, to get to the DC police and say, arrest them, pointing at each other. And then it's going to come down to who's loyal to who. Who will the DC police choose? Well, I'll tell you what. In the unlikely event, and I mean this is unlikely, it's possible, but unlikely, that it came down to it, I'd be willing to bet the police, they're going to side with the executive branch. Now, some people tell me that's impossible because, many police officers, former military and current military swore an oath to defend the Constitution. And I say, listen, what do you think? You have to understand. From the day Trump was elected, they've been calling for his impeachment. The resistance has been actively messing with Trump's administration. Not his people aren't getting appointed. They're blocking all of his orders. They're stopping the president who was elected. So you're going to see many people who are working for the military, the police, law enforcement, who see that and say they are trying to subvert our rule of law and Constitution and the will of the people. On the other side, they look at Trump as an agent of Russia, empowered by Russians, manipulation, all conspiracy nonsense. Sure, because I don't believe it, but they do. They really, really do. And then they're going to say, this is a man who should not have been president, who is not my president, who is never president, and he must be stopped by any means necessary. He is subverting the Constitution. He is corrupt, Ukraine, etc. They believe it. They believe it more than you realize. And so there are people in various factions who would think the same thing, that Trump is trying to resist being caught. He's a criminal, a foreign actor. He must be removed. Oh no, he's rallying his troops to come and stop us. In the end, I think the executive branch will side with the executive branch, which means Trump wouldn't be removed. The reason I bring this up is people don't seem to realize what it means that there could be a new civil war. It doesn't mean that your aunt or uncle who is a liberal or conservative are going to be fighting to the death in the streets over some ideology. It means the overwhelming majority of people will be cowering in their bedrooms with their doors locked, asking for help. and you will have confusion in the streets. No one will know who is in charge and who to obey. And you might have mid-level government agents telling their staff, disobey the president. And they say, that's my boss. I have to listen to my boss. You may have moderately high-ranking individuals in the military saying, defy the president. At the same time, other moderately high-ranking individuals saying, no, the president must be protected. Who sides with who completely depends on what they're watching, what they're seeing, and what they know. That's the real risk. The breakdown in confidence and a political polarization that is so extreme it cannot be mended because the other is irredeemable, as Bill Maher said. I'll leave it there. Hopefully we don't get to that point. And I think a lot of the stuff we're seeing on TV is just for show, but that could all just add to the problem. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m., youtube.com/Timcast. It is a different channel. This one's going to be about Obama issuing a warning to the left. You're going too far. Stick around. I will see you there.